All right, so welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're looking at something really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it has to do with cancer treatments,
Yeah.
like radiation and chemotherapy. You know
Uh,
how rough those can be on your body, right?
yeah, definitely.
So we're diving into how we can maybe support those patients a little better. And
Okay.
we dug through all sorts of stuff, scientific papers, internal research
Oh,
documents.
really?
Yeah. Some of it was even in Korean.
Wow.
It took some real digging, let me tell you.
I bet.
But the thing that's really interesting is this thing called HemoHIM.
HemoHIM, okay.
Yeah, have you heard of this?
I have not, actually.
So this stuff is super interesting because it's like this blend of traditional Asian medicine with like modern science.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's a mix of 3 plants:
Okay.
Angelica radix root,
Hmm.
uh, Conidium officinale rhizome,
Okay.
and Peonia japonica root.
All right. A mouthful.
Yeah, they're not exactly common names, right?
No, not at all.
But get this. So the scientists who came up with this, they were at the Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute.
The what?
Yeah, the Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute.
So we're talking about, like, nuclear scientists?
Yeah, like what are they doing messing around with herbs, right?
It seems a little out of their wheelhouse, you'd think.
Right. But apparently they were looking for a way to help protect the researchers there from radiation.
Oh, okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah, it's like a super dangerous job.
For sure.
But what they found was that this HemoHIM, it does something pretty amazing to the immune system.
So it's not just about protecting against radiation.
It seems like it's more than that, like it boosts your whole immune system.
Interesting. And what's being done with it now?
Well, in Korea, they're marketing it as a health functional food.
What's a health functional food?
It's basically their term for something that has specific health benefits,
Okay.
but they have some evidence to back it up.
So it's not just a random marketing claim.
Yeah, exactly. But the research that they're finding is suggesting that it does even more than just everyday immune support.
Like what?
Well, they're thinking it could maybe even help cancer patients deal with all the horrible side effects of their treatments.
Oh, wow. That's a big deal.
It is, right.
Yeah.
So they've done all these studies with animals, and it seems like this HemoHIM actually reduces the damage from chemo and radiation.
How so?
One of the biggest risks with those treatments is that your white blood cell count drops.
Oh, right. That makes them super vulnerable to infections.
Exactly.
It can be really dangerous.
And HemoHIM seems to be able to stop that drop from happening.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
It is. Some of these studies are really in-depth, too. Like, they look at all the different types of white blood cells.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It shows just how specific this stuff can be.
So it's not just a general boost, it's targeted.
Yeah, exactly. But there's more.
Even more.
Yeah. They're finding that it might also help with tissue regeneration.
Tissue regeneration. Okay. Like what kind of tissue are we talking about?
Well, another common side effect is damage to the gut lining.
Oh, right. That makes sense.
And that can lead to all sorts of other issues.
Yeah, it can really mess things up.
But it looks like HemoHIM could actually help to protect and regenerate that gut lining.
So it's healing from the inside out.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's leading to faster healing and fewer side effects.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's not just about fighting cancer then.
Right. It's like it's making the whole body healthier.
It's promoting overall well-being.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes you wonder, what else have they found?
Well, they've been doing studies on animals, and they've found some pretty cool stuff.
Okay, what kind of stuff?
Like anti-diabetic effects.
Really?
Yeah, it seems like it can actually help with blood sugar control.
And how does it do that?
Well, they're not entirely sure yet, but it even seems to be improving pancreatic function in some of the animals.
That's wild. So are they saying it could be a treatment for diabetes?
They're not there yet, but it's something they're definitely looking into.
That's really exciting.
It is. It just shows how connected everything is.
Right. Like, who would have thought this herbal remedy could have an impact on diabetes?
And this is all just from animal studies, so imagine what they'll find when they start doing more research on humans.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what they come up with.
It's like this one little herbal concoction is opening up all these doors to understanding how the body works.
I know, it's amazing. So have they done any human trials?
They have. They've done a bunch in Korea, specifically on cancer patients.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. What did they find?
Well, a lot of these trials focused on patients with breast and cervical cancer who were going through radiation therapy, and they found that HemoHIM seemed to help with those low white blood cell counts.
The ones we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That's huge. especially for those patients who are already so vulnerable.
It really
So it's
is.
like giving their immune system a much-needed boost.
Exactly. The results are still pretty early,
I understand.
but it's definitely offering some hope for people who are going through these tough
It's
treatments.
got to be a relief to know there might be something that can help.
Absolutely. And there's one trial that I found particularly interesting.
Really? What was that?
It looked at the psychological impact of HemoHIM.
Psychological, so not just the physical effects.
Right. They didn't have a ton of data,
Okay.
but what they found was that some of the patients were saying they felt less fatigued and that inflammation went down.
So like an overall improvement in well-being.
Yeah, it's like HemoHIM was helping them feel better both physically and mentally.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. And to think all of this is coming from plants.
It's incredible. Like something from nature could actually make such a difference in cancer care.
And maybe even beyond that.
You really think so?
Well, I mean, they're already finding all these other benefits.
That's true.
So who knows what else they might discover.
And it's really exciting to think about.
It is. And get this HemoHIM stuff is already a multi-million-dollar product in Korea.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah. And some people are saying it could end up being a huge global market.
Well, if it can do all the things they say it can, I can definitely see that happening.
I know, it's crazy to think about. So it's scientifically intriguing and it's making money. So what's next for this HemoHIM?
That's a good question.
Right. Like, where do they go from here?
I guess we'll have to see what the research shows, but it seems like they have a lot of options.
They do. I'm really curious to see what the future holds for this stuff.
Me too. It seems like it has the potential to really change things.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive so far.
It has.
I'm eager to hear more about what you found in those research papers.
I know, there's so much more to talk about.
Okay, well, let's not keep everyone waiting, though.
You're right. Let's get to it.
Okay, so we were just talking about how successful HemoHIM is in Korea.
Right. Like, it's already a huge product there.
Yeah, and we're talking about all these potential benefits. So it kind of makes you wonder,
What's that?
why isn't it more widely available?
That's a good point. You'd think something this promising would be everywhere by now.
Right. It seems like it could really help a lot of people.
Definitely. So what's the holdup?
Well, one of the big things is all the regulations around the world for herbal remedies.
Oh, right. Like, different countries have different rules.
Exactly.
So even though it's already sold in Korea, it might have to go through a whole new approval process to be sold elsewhere.
Yeah, and especially if they want to market it for specific uses, like for cancer patients.
That makes sense.
And that whole process can take forever.
Yeah, and it can cost a ton of money, too.
Right. They might even need to do more clinical trials,
So it's like a waiting game.
basically.
But our sources mentioned some pretty interesting things happening in Korea.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
They're working on these HemoHIM-based medical foods.
Medical foods, huh?
Yeah, it's not just like adding it to a protein bar or something.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's more like they're designed to address the specific nutritional needs of people going through cancer treatment.
Ah, so it's like a more targeted approach.
Exactly. It's about
Yeah.
giving their bodies the extra support they need.
Makes sense because, like we were saying earlier, those treatments can really mess with your nutrition.
Yeah, for sure.
People lose their appetite, they get nauseous.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they can't even absorb nutrients properly.
Right. It's a whole mess.
So these medical foods are designed to be easy to digest and gentle on the stomach.
And they make sure people are getting all the nutrients they need.
Precisely.
It's like giving their bodies the tools to fight back.
I like that analogy.
And have they actually tested these medical foods?
They have. Some of them have already gone through clinical trials in Korea.
Really?
Yeah, and some are even available there.
That's amazing. So what have they found?
Well, there was this one study that looked at people with head and neck cancer.
Okay.
They were going through radiation therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And the results were pretty encouraging.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the medical food really seemed to help with their nutritional status.
Which is super important for recovery.
Absolutely. They lost less weight and they were better able to maintain their muscle mass.
Wow, that's great.
It is. And it makes sense, right?
Yeah, totally.
If your body has what it needs, it can focus on healing.
Exactly.
And there's even evidence that these medical foods can improve people's quality of life.
Really?
Yeah, they reported feeling less fatigued and even their appetites improved.
That's huge, especially for people going through something as tough as cancer treatment.
I know, it's really inspiring.
So it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.
Exactly. But let's take a step back for a moment.
Okay.
What do you think all of this means for the future of cancer care?
That's a big question.
I know, but it's something to think about.
Mm.
We're seeing this convergence of conventional medicine and traditional practices.
Right, like it's not about choosing one or the other.
Yeah, it's about finding the best of both worlds.
And HemoHIM is kind of the perfect example of that, right?
I think so.
It came from modern science, but it's rooted in traditional Asian medicine.
Exactly. And I think we're going to see more of this happening.
Like, what do you mean?
I think researchers are going to keep looking into natural compounds.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe one day we'll have personalized blends of these natural ingredients.
Tailored to each person's needs.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing vision.
I know, right?
But with any new field, there are always going to be challenges.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, what kind of challenges are we talking about?
Well, first and foremost, we need to make sure these natural therapies are safe and effective.
Right. Just because something comes from nature doesn't mean it's good for you.
Exactly. And we also need to make sure the quality is consistent.
That's important.
Like, you don't want people getting different results because the product isn't standardized.
Makes sense.
And then there are the ethical considerations.
Yeah, like what?
We need to respect the cultural heritage and intellectual property rights of the communities where this knowledge comes from.
That's a good point.
It's about making sure everyone benefits from these discoveries.
Not just big corporations.
Right. It needs to be fair and equitable.
I agree. So it's not just about scientific breakthroughs.
It's about being responsible and thoughtful.
Yeah, and making sure we're doing things the right way.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about all these potential benefits of HemoHIM, but one thing I keep coming back to is the anti-diabetic effects.
It is pretty remarkable.
Like, it's fascinating that something being studied for cancer could also have such a big impact on metabolic health.
I know, it's like it's doing double duty.
Exactly. So what's the connection there?
Well, it seems like it all comes down to inflammation.
Okay, how so?
Well, we already talked about how HemoHIM can help regulate the immune system.
Right, it's an immunomodulator.
Exactly. And we also know that chronic inflammation is a big factor in a lot of diseases.
Including diabetes.
Right.
So the idea is that by reducing inflammation, HemoHIM could help prevent or manage diabetes.
That's the thinking.
And is there any evidence to support that?
There is. They did this study on mice with type 1 diabetes,
Okay.
and they found that HemoHIM actually improved their blood sugar control.
Wow. Seriously?
Yeah. And their insulin levels went up too.
That's incredible.
And not only that, but it also reduced inflammation in their bodies.
So it's not just masking the symptoms.
It's addressing the root cause.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And we know chronic inflammation is linked to so many other diseases too.
Right, like heart disease, Alzheimer's, even cancer.
So this research could have implications far beyond just diabetes.
Exactly. It's really exciting stuff.
It is, but of course we need more research,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
especially on humans. But the evidence we have so far is definitely intriguing.
I agree. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
You're right. So we've talked about the potential benefits, the research, and even those medical foods. But there's one more thing we need to discuss,
What's that?
the financial side of things.
Ah, right, because HemoHIM isn't just a science project.
No, it's already a multi-million-dollar product.
And some people are saying it could be worth billions globally.
That's a lot of money. So what do we know about the economics of this whole thing?
Well, the Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute is already making a lot of money from it.
That's where it was developed, right?
Yeah.
It's like a real success story.
It is. And that success has led to more investment in research.
Makes sense. It's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. And as HemoHIM becomes more popular internationally, that loop is just going to get bigger.
So everyone wins.
Well, not
What do
necessarily.
you mean?
There's always the risk that the focus will shift from science and patient safety to just making money.
Oh, right.
Like companies might start cutting corners or making exaggerated claims.
That would be bad.
It would, and we need to be mindful of that.
For sure. So it's important to remember that HemoHIM isn't a miracle cure.
Yeah, it has potential benefits, but it's not a magic bullet.
And people should always talk to their doctor before using it. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
And it's clear that HemoHIM is at this intersection of science, tradition, and commerce.
It's a really fascinating case study.
It is. But before we move on, I want to go back to something we mentioned earlier.
What's that?
The fact that HemoHIM was discovered at a nuclear research facility,
Oh, yeah, that's pretty wild.
it's just so unexpected. Like, what were nuclear scientists doing exploring herbal remedies?
I know, it's a great story.
It really is. So let's rewind a bit and talk about how this all started.
Okay,
So working with radioactive materials is obviously super dangerous.
yeah, for sure.
And one of the biggest risks is damage to the immune system.
Makes sense. Your immune system is your first line of defense.
Exactly. So, back in the 90s, some scientists at the Korea Atomic Energy Research Institute,
Mm-hmm.
they decided to try and find a natural way to protect the researchers there from radiation.
It's like they were trying to create a real-life superhero serum.
I know, right?
And their search led them to traditional Asian medicine.
It's a great example of blending ancient wisdom with modern science.
I agree.
And after years of research, they came up with HemoHIM.
This unique blend of 3 herbs.
And at first, it was just supposed to be a radiation protectant.
But it turned out to be so much more.
It's amazing what they found.
Yeah, it's a testament to the power of curiosity and being open to new ideas.
I agree. And it shows that sometimes the answers to our problems can be found in the most unexpected places.
Well said.
All right, so that's it for part 2 of our deep dive into HemoHIM.
It's been a great conversation so far.
It has. And in part 3, we're going to take a closer look at how those HemoHIM-based medical foods are developed.
We'll also delve a bit deeper into the psychological benefits.
And of course, we can't forget about the business side of things.
Lots more to discuss.
We'll see you there. Welcome back. So we've talked a lot about HemoHIM, the research, the potential benefits, but let's zoom in on those HemoHIM-based medical foods.
So,
It's not just about, like, tossing some herbs into a blender, right?
yeah, definitely not.
It seems like there's a whole science to it.
There is. It's pretty complex, actually.
So tell me about it. Like, how do they actually create these medical foods?
Well, you have to understand the needs of the patients.
Yeah, like what their bodies are going through.
Exactly. So things like taste and texture are important.
Oh, yeah, because if it doesn't taste good, people aren't going to eat it.
Exactly. And it needs to be easy to digest.
Makes sense, especially if they're already dealing with nausea and stuff.
Right. And then, of course, there's the science behind HemoHIM itself.
So it's like balancing science with practicality.
You got it. They actually have whole teams of people working on this.
Like who?
Scientists, nutritionists, food technologists, you name it.
Wow, so it's a real collaboration.
It is.
Yeah.
Everyone brings their own expertise to the table.
Okay, so walk me through it. Like, what's an example of something they have to figure out?
Well, one of the big things is figuring out the right dosage of HemoHIM.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Like, you don't want to give people too little, but you also don't want to give them too much.
Right, there's going to be a sweet spot.
Exactly. So they do all these studies to figure out the optimal dose.
Dose-response studies, right.
They look at how different doses affect different outcomes.
Okay, so they're looking for the maximum benefit with the least amount of risk.
Exactly. That's the goal.
So it's like a careful balancing act.
It really is.
But the dosage is just one part of it, right?
Right. They also have to think about all the other ingredients in the medical food.
Yeah, like why is that so important?
Well, we talked about how cancer patients often have trouble getting the nutrients they need.
Right, from all the side effects of treatment.
So they have to make sure these medical foods are packed with all the good stuff.
Like what?
Proteins, carbs, fats, vitamins, minerals, the whole shebang.
So it's not just about adding HemoHIM, it's about creating a complete nutritional package.
Precisely. It's all about supporting the body in every way possible.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It is. It really shows how much thought and care goes into developing these medical foods.
So it's like personalized nutrition.
In a way, yeah. It's all about tailoring it to the specific needs of the individual.
I love that.
And it's important to remember that it's not just about the ingredients themselves.
Okay, what else is there?
It's also about how those ingredients work together.
Like synergy.
Exactly. Sometimes the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
That makes sense.
So they have to make sure everything is working in harmony.
to create the best possible outcome for the patient.
That's the goal.
All right, so we've talked about the physical benefits of these medical foods, but earlier we mentioned something about psychological benefits too.
Oh, yeah. That's a really interesting area.
It is. Like, it's fascinating to think that something like HemoHIM could impact mental well-being.
I know, right? It's not just about the body, it's about the mind, too.
Exactly. So what kind of evidence do we have for that?
Well, remember that study we talked about with the head and neck cancer patients?
The one where they looked at nutritional status.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
So they also looked at psychological well-being in that study.
How did they do that?
They used standardized questionnaires to measure things like mood and anxiety.
Okay, and what did they find?
Well, the patients who got the HemoHIM-based medical food, they reported feeling better mentally.
Seriously?
Yeah. They had improvements in their mood, and they felt less anxious.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
It suggests it has to do with the immune system.
Okay, remind me, how is the immune system connected to mental health?
It turns out that the immune system and the nervous system are actually pretty closely linked.
Really?
Yeah, it's a relatively new area of research.
Interesting.
But scientists are finding that certain immune cells can actually produce neurochemicals.
Neurochemicals, the things that affect our mood.
Exactly. So by modulating the immune system, HemoHIM could be indirectly influencing those neurochemical.
It's like a domino effect.
Kinda, yeah.
Oh,
It's all connected.
it just blows my mind how complex the human body is.
I know, right? And we're still learning so much about how it all works.
It's really exciting.
It is. It makes you wonder what else we might discover.
Okay, so we've talked about the science behind HemoHIM, the development of the medical foods,
Mm-hmm.
but there's another aspect we haven't really touched on,
What's that?
the business side of things.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other story.
It is. Like, HemoHIM is a multi-million-dollar product in Korea. So how did they get it from the lab to the market?
Well, it all started with getting approval as a health functional food.
That was back in 2006, right?
Yep. And
Yeah.
that gave them the green light to start marketing it to the public.
Okay, so what kind of marketing strategies did they use?
Well, one thing they really emphasized was the science behind HemoHIM.
Makes sense. People want to know that it actually works.
Exactly. They wanted to show that this wasn't just some folk remedy.
Right, it's backed by research.
And they also used a lot of testimonials from people who had used HemoHIM.
Those personal stories can be really persuasive.
They are. They make it real for people,
And they also tapped into the power of network marketing.
which, can be a bit controversial,
Yeah, for sure.
but it's definitely an effective way to get the word out.
So they built this network of passionate advocates who shared their experiences with HemoHIM.
Exactly. It's all about word of mouth.
And it clearly worked.
It did. HemoHIM became a huge success in Korea.
So it's a great example of how science and marketing can work together.
To bring a product to market.
Exactly. But it's not just about making money
Right. It's about helping people.
and improving their health and well-being.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about HemoHIM as a product,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's important to zoom out and think about what it represents.
What do you mean?
It's part of this bigger shift towards integrative medicine.
Oh, yeah, that's a really important point.
It's not just about treating diseases.
It's about looking at the whole person
Exactly. And supporting the body's natural healing abilities.
and preventing disease in the first place.
Right, it's a more holistic approach.
And I think people are really starting to embrace that.
I agree. Like, they're looking for alternatives to conventional medicine.
Yeah, they want something that's more natural, more gentle.
And that addresses the root cause of their problem.
Exactly. And HemoHIM's a perfect example of that.
It's like a bridge between science and tradition
And it shows that these two worlds can actually work together.
to create something truly innovative.
I think so, too.
But there are still challenges.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, some doctors are still pretty skeptical about natural therapies.
That's true, but I think that's changing.
Slowly but surely.
And we need to keep educating people about the benefits of integrative medicine.
Both patients and healthcare providers.
Absolutely. We need to bridge that gap.
And another challenge is the lack of standardization.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Like, we need clear guidelines for using these natural therapies.
Exactly. We need to know what works, how much to use, and what the potential risks are.
And we need to do more research.
Definitely.
But I'm optimistic.
Me too.
I think we're moving in the right direction.
I agree.
It's an exciting time to be involved in this field.
It is. The possibilities are endless.
So that brings us to the end of our deep dive into HemoHIM.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has. We've covered a lot of ground.
From the science to the business to the future of healthcare.
And I hope you've learned something new along the way.
Me too. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this exploration.
We encourage you to keep learning.
And to stay curious about the world of natural therapies and integrative medicine.
There's so much out there to discover.
And who knows what amazing breakthroughs might be just around the corner.
That's right. The future is bright.
Until next time, stay healthy and keep exploring.